What's up, guys? Today we're going to be talking about Monsanto, a multi-billion-dollar agricultural and agrochemical biotech company founded in 1901 in St. Louis. And in 2016, they were bought by Bayer for $66 million. The scandal that we'll be focusing on today revolves around lawsuits over the chemical glyphosate, as well as their illegal accounting practices. The themes that we will also bring up are organizational culture, as well as power, political, and social networks.
Hey everyone, I'm Kiara Keel, and I'll be discussing allegations of carcinogens in their herbicides.
My name is Byron, and I'm going to be talking about the SEC investigation into the illegal accounting practices at Monsanto.
I will also be talking about ghostwriting as well as collusion.
Hi guys, I'm Kenzie. I will be talking about the steps that Monsanto can take moving forward.
Hey, Kira, so tell us about Monsanto and the challenges they have faced.
Of course, Monsanto faced some major challenges in 2017 when claims started to surface about carcinogens in their herbicide products, and 40 plaintiffs filed against the company. On August 10, 2018, Monsanto lost their first case against a non-Hodgkin's lymphoma plaintiff.
How many lawsuits were filed?
More than 8,000 cancer patients filed lawsuits against Monsanto, claiming they failed to warn the public about the risk of cancer associated with their Roundup weed killer. Monsanto denied all allegations, but were still faced with significant legal damages. The main defendant was a man named Edwin Hardman, who claimed Roundup was a contributing factor to his non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. In March of 2019, Monsanto was found liable in federal court after a series of appeals. And this means that the company would be faced with $80 million in legal damages. And Bayer, the new parent company of Monsanto, claims they will appeal the verdict.
How does this relate to organizational culture?
These instances of claims against the company regarding their neglect to address extensive public concern connects to the theme of organizational culture because their controversial behavior may suggest that the irresponsibility of the organizational leaders have influenced the overall neglectful culture of the company towards the community.
And then how does this relate to power and politics?
Well, this behavior connects to power and politics because Monsanto is a multi-million-dollar company that has the influential ability to sway lawmakers. In fact, since 1998 and as of 2013, they spent more than $70 million in lobbying and $10 million in campaign contributions in the past decade. Moreover, in 2019, Micah Taylor, the former vice president of public policy at Monsanto, was named by President Obama as the deputy commissioner for the Food and Veterinary Medicine at the FDA. And from this information, it is clear how deeply embedded Monsanto has become in the higher ranks of the government and how the company has been able to quietly influence national food policy. Tell me about the SEC investigation into Monsanto.
On February 9, 2016, Monsanto agreed to pay $80 million in penalties and retain an independent compliance consultant to settle the charges brought by the SEC that it had misstated earnings from its Roundup product. An investigation by the SEC had found that there were not enough internal accounting controls for the millions of dollars in rebates that were given to distributors of Roundup. What had happened was a generic competitor had undercut the price of Roundup, which had caused Monsanto to lose a large percentage of the market share. To combat this loss, Monsanto encouraged U.S. distributors to quote-unquote maximize the amount of Roundup that they bought in the fourth quarter of the 2009 fiscal year so that they could participate in this rebate program. Two certified public accountants, Anthony P. Hartke and Sarah M. Brunkwell, both approved of this rebate campaign. However, Monsanto took back approximately $57.3 million in rebates from distributors because they did not reach the volume targets in the fourth quarter of the 2009 fiscal year.
Okay, tell me a bit more about Monsanto's rebate programs.
For the distributors who had their rebates reversed, Monsanto had a second campaign that allowed them to earn those back in the next year if they reached new target goals. For the 2009 fiscal year, there was $44.5 million in rebates promised to two of Monsanto's largest distributors. However, they were paid in 2010, and so they were recorded in 2010. However, the SEC GAAP generally accepted accounting principle states that these rebates, since they were promised in 2009, need to be recorded in 2009, not 2010 like they were. They also did this in 2010 and 2011 with $48 million in rebates. According to Scott W. Freistead, who is the Associate Director of the SEC's Division of Enforcement, quote, Monsanto devised rebate programs that elevated form over substance, which led to the booking of substantial amounts of revenue without the recognition of the associated costs. Public companies need to have robust systems in place to ensure that all of their transactions are recognized in the correct reporting period. Basically, Monsanto had pushed costs back a year to make their revenues in 2009 look good, and the same in 2010. They pushed the cost back to 2011, which you are not allowed to do. Interestingly enough, you would think this would come like an order from the top down, but the investigation by the SEC found that there was no wrongdoing on the part of the CEO, Hugh Grant, or the former CFO, Carl Castle. They reimbursed the company about $3 million and $700,000 respectively for cash bonuses and certain stock awards that they had earned during the period when these violations occurred.
What does company culture tell us about this scandal?
Looking at this from a company culture lens tells us a few things. The culture at Monsanto seems to be a very aggressive culture. They care more about getting good-looking revenues and books than they do about doing the right thing. I would say the values is where the company falls short. There's nothing really that jumps out as an assumption from any of these things, but the values are pretty clear that the value of winning at all costs led to the illegal bookkeeping, and that pretty much the accountants in the company knew that this was more important than doing the right thing. The strength of Monsanto's culture is difficult to gauge, however, because it seems like it's like a Wells Fargo with a very strong culture that's just going the wrong direction. However, because there was no wrongdoing on the part of the CEO or the CFO, it's very possible that this aggressive culture could just be a subculture in the company. It's also possible this subculture could have developed due to increased urgency from the generic competitor undercutting the price of Roundup, which caused the accountants to think it necessary to break the laws of GAAP.
Okay, so what does power politics and social networks tell us about this scandal?
Looking at it from a perspective of power, politics, and social networks, the story is pretty different. The weight doesn't necessarily fall all on the accountants like it does from a company culture standpoint. The accountants were using their expert power to abuse the rules of GAAP, hoping that they wouldn't get caught. However, there seems to either be too much upward influence or too little downward influence in Monsanto. The CFO and CEO were found to have no personal misconduct, which does make it hard to tell whether the accountants convinced the CFO that would be okay, or did they just not tell him. Either way, there's too little influence coming from the people up at the top, which puts more of the blame on them, even though they technically did nothing wrong. The tail seems to be wagging the dog at Monsanto.
All right, Judge, what is ghostwriting and what does this have to do with Monsanto?
Yeah, so much attention has been paid to Monsanto's conversations in which the company's scientists casually discussed ghostwriting scientific papers, and which, for those who don't know what ghostwriting is, it's when someone writes an article and rather than signing their name, they'll cite another industry expert who are considered more credible. Yeah, and initially when the scientific results first came out about the herbicide glyphosate, it didn't yield the results Monsanto desired. So the company talked internally about writing its own journal articles and paying outside scientists to list their names on documents when they were sent for publication. Yeah, in addition to this, Monsanto was refusing to conduct long-term product safety studies. The company was spending millions of dollars on secretive PR campaigns, and including a $17 million budget in that in a single year, to finance ghost-written studies and op-eds aimed at discrediting independent scientists whose work found dangers in the chemical glyphosate.
And then at the same time as those studies are coming out, Monsanto is ghostwriting studies that say the opposite.
One of these studies will become the reference, according to Monsanto. It's published in 2000 and concluded that Roundup herbicide does not pose a health risk to humans.
Okay.
And
Was there any collusion associated with the ghostwriting?
Yeah, so in addition to ghostwriting, Monsanto suppressed science that conflicted with corporate assertions of Roundup safety. There have been public outrage over internal records illustrating cozy relationships with friendly regulators, which border on and possibly into collusion.
Not only that they knew about it causing cancer, that they went out of their way to attack scientists that raised concerns and to full out, and I mean this straightforwardly, commit fraud.
Monsanto has been accused for trying to influence the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, to persuade the other agency of this department called the Agency of Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, which is a toxicological arm of the Department of Health and Human Services, from carrying out its own negative assessment of the glyphosate, an active ingredient in Roundup. And when the U.S. Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry sought to evaluate glyphosate toxicity in 2015, Monsanto expressed concern about what the agency might find and engaged the assistance of the EPA officials to delay the review. The efforts delayed the release of the public draft of the review, originally to be issued 3 years ago, until earlier this month. Just as Monsanto had feared, the agency's review found links between cancer and the glyphosate. And
sounds pretty serious.
yeah, and another example, Monsanto has extreme pull over government officials. Another example is unsealed documents revealing that Jess Rowland, the EPA official charged with evaluating the cancer risk of the glyphosate exposure, was looking out for Monsanto's interests rather than telling the truth about the harmful side effects of the herbicide. In an email, he stated, "We know but cannot say. The EPA's Office of Pesticide Program scientists strongly feel that glyphosate does not cause cancer and have defended their written determination internally for months." And he said this even though he was aware of tests showing how easily the chemicals in Roundup are absorbed into the human skin.
To sow that doubt, Brent says Monsanto hid studies.
Is we show studies that Monsanto has done that show real risks that have been buried.
Neither the company nor the EPA have warned consumers to the need of wearing protective clothing, so he lied straight to their face.
Wow.
Yeah.
As we've heard, Monsanto is facing some serious issues that appear to be stemming from their organizational culture. Moving forward, there are 6 main steps that Monsanto can take to create cultural change among their organization. Step 1, create a sense of urgency. Step 2, change leaders and other key players, especially managers and other powerful employees who are acting as a barrier to change. Step 3, practice role modeling, or the process by which employees modify their own beliefs and behaviors to reflect those of the leader. Step 4, training, to teach employees new norms and behavioral styles and to foster these new behaviors. Step 5, change the reward system. This can have a powerful role in determining the cultural values in existence. And last but not least, step 6, create new symbols and stories. In addition to these 6 steps, Monsanto also needs to ensure that there are sufficient checks and balances in place in order to resist the urge to conform and abuse authority.